Hello, everyone. Anyone out there? Say hello if you are. I see 5 people. Okay, hello, Gavin. All right. Anyone else? Hopefully you guys are doing well. I posted a question there. Hello, Selena. Is it Selena or Selena? The infinity screens are back. I'm going to try something a little bit different this time. Hi, Denise. And I do have a question for you. What are you all studying? I'd like to know what you're studying, reading, writing these days, so you could tell me about that as we wait for maybe a couple people to show up. I do see 6 people. If you would just say hello, you're there. We're gonna get going here in a minute or so. And yeah, so I right now what we're doing is we're about getting ready to start reading Oedipus the King, kind of that classic work of tragedy. Finished Othello, beginning Things Fall Apart. Okay, that's kind of a nice succession. My man Arthur going to help us study for English. Yes, Gavin, that's my goal. Cool. Anything else? Anything else that you guys are studying at this point? I really like that combination of Othello and Things Fall Apart. Are those thematically connected there, Selena? I think they definitely could be. Or is it just you're reading one book after the other? Scarlet Letter, Heart of Darkness. Okay. So mostly reading books, I think, at this point, kind of trying to get some material that you can use for the open prompt, as we've talked about that a little bit. Okay, well, I do see some more people signed up, and I guess we'll just see if they chime in. They're welcome to. As usual, I don't trust that this actually works. I'm teaching the 11 pre-AP. I'm curious about the Crowncast. We just completed a poetry unit. So Denise, you are a teacher, is that right? You're just checking this out? Fellow teacher, okay. All right, awesome. Curious about the Crowdcast. So, I mean, we do this through Fiveable, and Fiveable is kind of an online, preparation service, basically preparing you for the AP exams. We have a lot of different subject areas that we do this for. And so this is AP English literature. We also have AP English language and APUSH and world history, calculus, everything. So actually, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that as we get to the end here. We are kind of coming up on, we either need to buy into this. I'd pay for Fiveable, but my parents still only be paying for study materials. Okay. Well, I mean, it's a really, really ridiculously good deal. And it's even better now than it will be later on. So, Amanda has kind of an interesting pricing thing that for any of you who can get in now, it's going to be best to do that now. People who wait around until they're freaking out, it's going to be more expensive then. So I hope that you guys can, continue on, but we're going to start moving more, paid. And again, it's on the very cheap end of the spectrum compared to a lot of the other services out there. So I think it's a good idea personally. And so anyways, is this American? Yeah. Yeah. Where are you from, Denise? Are you elsewhere? Are you somewhere other than America? I think the College Board is worldwide, but okay, you're Cambridge, Ontario. Okay. Hey, I'm coming over to Stratford, Ontario to see, I'm going to check out Stratford, Stratfest. So I don't know if you go to that. I'm not sure. Where's Cambridge located? Is it Southern Ontario? About 30 minutes away. Oh, I'm so excited. It's looking like I'm not going to be able to make it to Coriolanus and the Tempest, but I hear such great things about it, and I'm going to need to chaperone my kids back just Friday. We're only going to see The Music Man. So I hear really good things about that, but I would like to see the Shakespeare plays because I've heard that they're excellent as well. Okay. Oh, American literature. Thanks, Gavin. Yep. So, well, we pretty much open it up to anything that is, written in English. That's the English lit. So, anything's fair game. And in fact, we're going to do something English today. So, all right, I'm going to get going here. And I just want to kind of jump in. I'm going to jump over to the slides and then jump right back. Tell me whether or not you can still hear me. Okay, and we're doing need to know terms for the poetry prompt, and we're going to talk about imagery for starters. Let me know if you can see and hear everything that you're supposed to. You should see a slide there. So I'm going to jump back. Just tell me yes, indeed. Okay, so can you guys see that? Were you able to see that? Were you able to hear that? Thank you, Gavin. Okay, I'm going to switch back over, and we'll just get going here. I think let's use, it seems like most people like stream over here for the questions. So why don't we just use that as questions? If you have any questions or comments, I'm actually going to ask you on a number of occasions, to kind of chime in on the poem that we're doing. And I'd like to have your observations as well. And so I'll come back to this every now and again. Let's just go ahead and use the stream over here on the right side. Okay, so I need to know terms for the poetry prompt. We talked about this last week, and a lot of people were a little bit concerned as they saw the multiple choice that there are need to know terms. There's a fair amount of multiple choice questions that involve terminology on the AP English Literature exam. And then, of course, when we get on to the free response questions, we're going to also need to know those terms, and we want to be able to use as many of those as possible. So we're going to start out with imagery. I think imagery is kind of a nice way to just kind of ease into this. There are multiple parts here, and I want to get you into some maybe more difficult concepts as time goes on. But let's start with imagery and maybe teach you a thing or two here, but and also some review, but also getting a chance to get more and more familiar with the poetry prompt, which is free response question number 1. So again, I just like to kind of give you a sense of what the AP exam is going to be like. So first of all, you got your multiple choice, 1 hour, 55 multiple choice questions, 1/2 prose, 1/2 poetry. So prose is from short stories or novels, excerpts of that, and then they ask you questions about those. 1/2 older, 1/2 modern. And we're actually going to be looking at a somewhat older text right now today in our free response questions. You have a 10-minute break. You come back and you have your free response questions, and that is going to be 2 hours long. You have to write 3 essays, and there are 3 essay questions or prompts. Question number 1 is the poetry prompt, which we're going to discuss today. And if you guys are enjoying this and feel like this is helpful, we'll do this maybe for a few weeks, actually, just kind of talking about the poetry prompt. Prose prompt is very, very similar, and I think it would be good to kind of segue into the prose prompt, and you will just be emphasizing and really continuing to study same kind of skills for the poetry prompt. And then question 3 is the open prompt, which is the one that you're reading all the novels for. So hopefully a big open-ended thematic question that can be answered using a lot of works of literature potentially, and choosing one of those works that you've read that answers that question. We'll talk about that throughout the year too. We are doing To Autumn, one of my favorite poems by John Keats, very emo romantic poet. And if you have not yet gotten this, I did post this in the stream, this URL, and it would make a lot of sense to go get that. Go to that URL that you see right there. And if you have not gone to it, you can kind of scroll back up the stream. It should be near the top of the stream, the link to Autumn. Okay, so let me just switch over and see if you guys have any questions or concerns about that, if you're good on that. Is it necessary to write poetry when studying for the exam? Not necessary, but if you're doing that, that's not a bad idea, actually, to kind of get some experience writing poetry, Kevin. Wouldn't be a bad idea. You won't have to write poetry on the exam itself. Okay, I'm going to switch back over, and let's advance here. And we're talking about, first of all, I want to remind you about our how to read a poem process. And I also posted this at the top of the stream. We did this a couple weeks ago. And I think this is a really good method for kind of systematically approaching all the poetry that you read. It will really cover a lot of the bases. It will give you some inroads into the poem, give you a couple places to look as you try to make sense of the poem. So that is also at the top of the stream. If you want to scroll up and open this up, I'm going to go over to it here in a second. First thing is enjoyment. I've mentioned this before. This is not just kind of like a meaningless step. When you really like something or you really don't like something, consider that the poet is intentionally doing something that is pleasant or unpleasant. Something that actually supports meaning. And that really is the poetry prompt in a nutshell, is that poets don't just do things for the heck of it. They want to give you this kind of intense experience, not necessarily a positive experience, actually in a lot of cases, a negative experience, but an intense experience. So if you notice something that you really like, or you notice something that you don't like, that actually may be an interesting inroad into understanding the poem. So those are kind of the annotations that we use for that. Meaning, I use an asterisk for that. Talk about some of the different kind of meanings that you can look for. Structure and language, I put those together. I think it's a good reading to do kind of side by side. Structure is any of the structural elements of the poem. Language is the kinds of words and, just how you would describe the language that is being used. Mood and tone, I want you to choose an emoji, some emoji. I think it's a good idea to get kind of a sense of what is the mood that's being expressed, what is the speaker feeling, what is the emotion that they're experiencing. Tone is the way that they express that emotion. So it's a little bit different than mood. You can express anger in kind of a hot or intense kind of way. You can also express anger in a cool kind of way or a sarcastic kind of way. So the tone is the way that that's expressed, and we need to pick up on context clues to kind of figure out where that is. I always like you to do a conclusion, even if you don't do a full-fledged response, and actually do a timed writing, which is a full-fledged kind of essay. But at the very least, I like you to do a body paragraph. That's what I tell my students to do. Do a body paragraph on one of these areas that you've kind of noticed. And ideally, as you get into this, eventually you'll be able to do 2 to 3 body paragraphs on different topics about how the poet uses whatever these techniques are, these poetic techniques, to convey meaning. Okay, I'm going to actually switch over to the how to read a poem right now. And let's see if I can do this simultaneously. Let me do this. I'm going to bring up the crowdcast, and I'm going to bring up the how to read a poem so I can kind of see both. Hopefully this looks okay for you. Only see one person in here yet, but how to read a poem, pretty much same thing. Meaning, let me just kind of remind you some of the things that we can do for meaning. First of all, look up any unfamiliar words or phrases. We're trying to add to our vocabulary. We won't be able to do that on the exam, but any work that you can do toward building your vocabulary is good. You can also do educated guess or paraphrase based on the context. Also look for figurative language. Actually, figurative language, we're going to talk about a bunch of those. And allusion is another one. Imagery, irony, you picking up on verbal irony, saying kind of the opposite of what you mean. Those are all meaning related things. Structure, things like the shape of the poem on the page, line length, stanza length, rhyme scheme, repetition, any variations on those. How does that structure support the meaning of the poem? Language, when we talk about that, we're talking about the words and phrasing used by the author. Is the poet's language formal or informal, stuffy, down to earth? Does the poet use slang or foreign words? These are choices about language. And do any of those things convey meaning of the poem? Now, by the way, don't say old-fashioned kind of English, because obviously this was written in the 19th century and they talked that way back then. So that would not be significant. We may be able to point out some aspects of language here as we get into the poem itself. And then we have the mood and the tone down below. Okay, let's switch back over really quick. I think I have one more. Let me see. Do I have another that I want to talk about before we move on? Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about imagery. Okay. So definition of imagery. Imagery, as you can see, as this is loading very nice and slowly, the representation of sense experience through language. Okay. So the 5 senses, but stay tuned, we're actually going to get 2 extra senses. So very exciting. So first of all, why imagery? First of all, imagery experience comes mostly through the senses. Okay, that's the way that we experience the world. And so rather than through ideas or through abstractions, poets really do rely on imagery quite a bit. It is one of my favorite ones in terms of being able to answer these questions that they throw at us. If there is any imagery, we're pretty good at noticing imagery going all the way back to middle school. But what does a poet use it for? First of all, to evoke desired emotions. Okay, so you view positive kind of, pleasant imagery, pretty obviously, maybe, some pleasant emotions there. It communicates experience, not information, which a poet prefers. A poet is not a philosopher, is not writing a treatise, isn't trying to give you some sort of like blatant message. They are trying to communicate an intense experience. And it allows the reader to experience what the speaker experiences. Okay, so these are some of the reasons why poets really do like imagery. All right, obviously, visual imagery, one of the most common forms of imagery is imagery that suggests a mental picture. Auditory, imagery that represents a sound. Olfactory, getting a little fancy here. If you can use that, I think bonus points in the scorer's mind. Olfactory, imagery that represents a smell. Gustatory, again, bonus points. Imagery that represents a taste. Tactile imagery is imagery that represents the sense of touch. So those are the 5 senses, and we definitely want to pay attention to that. I think we have a tendency to notice visual first and foremost, but do not neglect these other forms of imagery. They very well may be present, and they may be playing an important role in the poem. Going to give you a couple more. Sense number 6 and sense number 7, organic imagery, is imagery that represents an internal sensation such as hunger, thirst, fatigue, or nausea. So basically things that are kind of happening in this vicinity of the body within. It's tactile is not quite right, because tactile is kind of like, the way things feel on the outside. This is an internal sensation. And then this is also an internal sensation. Kinesthetic imagery is imagery that represents movement or tension or maybe pain or tenseness in the muscles or joints. Okay, and so less common, but definitely worth mentioning some other kinds of imagery here that we should pay attention to. Okay, I think I'm going to... let's go ahead and go on to this. So let's remind you about the poetry prompt in a nutshell. It asks you, every single poetry prompt asks you, how does the poet use poetic techniques to convey meaning? And there are different ways of saying that: poetic devices, formal elements, elements such as, how, and then convey. Sometimes you see support, reveal, reflect, contribute to, express, develop, communicate. And then meaning, we have a bunch of different types of meaning. The message, complex response, attitudes, states of mind, perceptions, emotions, views, relationship between, maybe me and my surroundings, me in another person in significance. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. Now, how does this maybe relate to imagery? If you have pleasant imagery, and this is such an oversimplification, but let's just go with it. If you have pleasant imagery, it might be a positive meaning, so maybe I'm expressing kind of a positive attitude toward what I described. If I have unpleasant imagery, maybe I'm expressing something of a negative meaning or a negative attitude toward what I describe. And if it's kind of a combo of pleasant and unpleasant, maybe I have some ambivalence toward what I'm describing. That is a super big oversimplification, but I just want you to kind of get the gist that poets are employing imagery to convey, whatever that meaning is, that emotion, that attitude, that state of mind. And so if you see a lot of negative imagery, don't just write off the poem as, I don't like this poem. Maybe that is what's being conveyed. Okay, so be aware of that and don't write it off. Maybe that's what the poet wants you to experience. Okay, let's go over to you guys, and I'm going to come back over to Keats to Autumn, and I want to read this to you. This is one of my favorite poems, actually. Let's look at the prompt really quick. Read the following poem carefully, then write a well-organized essay in which you analyze how Keats uses poetic elements such as structure, imagery, and figurative language to reveal the speaker's perspective on autumn. Now, I like to underline and double underline, and I'm not going to be able to do that. I did not bring my my document camera, and I think this might even be a little bit easier to see. There's my elements. There's my poetic techniques. And they've listed off 3 things that I can use. I don't need to use this, but they're for sure in the poem. And then here is the meaning that they want me to pay attention to. And I'm just going to go ahead and underline this as well. I usually double underline that if I'm doing it paper and pencil. Okay, so that is the meaning they want me to look at. Now, a little bit of background about this poem. This is the last poem that Keats wrote before he succumbed to tuberculosis. And he's really not just writing about autumn. He's also writing about his own imminent death. He is not going to see spring again. He's writing this in about September, last year of his life. This is the last poem that he wrote in his full powers. And so when we're thinking about his perspective on autumn, we're really actually thinking about his perspective on death. Is he open? Is he accepting of this, or is he frightened of it? He knows he's going to die at this point. We know that from his letters, that he pretty much realizes what his situation is. So it's pretty important to kind of know that context a little bit with this poem. But I love this poem. To Autumn by John Keats. And what I'd like you to do, I'd like you in the comments, if you would, let's do that enjoyment piece first. Why don't you tell me some of the things that you like or do not like about this poem? Just go ahead and put that directly in the comments if you can do that as we go through this. Just kind of knee-jerk reaction to anything that we read here. Season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bless with fruit the vines that round the thatch eaves run, to bend with apples the mossed cottage trees, and to fill all fruit with a ripeness to the core, to swell the gourd and plump the hazel shell with a sweet kernel, to set budding more, and still more later flowers for the bees, until they think warm days will never cease, for summer has o'erbrimmed their clammy cells. Who hath not seen thee oft amid thy store? Sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting careless on a granary floor, thy hair soft lifted by the winnowing wind, or on a half-reaped furrow sound asleep, drowsed with the fume of poppies, while thy hook spares the next swath and all its twined flowers. And sometimes like a gleaner thou dost keep steady thy laden head across a brook, or by a cider press with patient look thou watches the last oozings hours by hours. Where are the songs of spring? Aye, where are they? Think not of them, thou hast thy music too. While borrowed clouds bloom the soft dying day, and touch the stubble plain with rosy hue, then in a wailful choir the small gnats mourn among the river sallows, borne aloft or sinking as the light wind lives or dies. In full-grown lambs loud bleat from hilly bourne, hedge crickets sing, and now with treble soft, the redbreast whistles from a garden croft, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies. Okay. Yeah. So what do you think? You like any of that? Anyone have anything that just kind of knee-jerk reaction to any of what I just read there? Did you like anything in particular? I love the imagery, I mean, right off the bat. I guess we might even be able to kind of look at this perspective on autumn. To me, I might even highlight this entire paragraph, this entire first stanza, and say the imagery is just gorgeous. It's beautiful. What's described here, I live in Michigan, and I don't know where you guys are located, but we have a beautiful autumn. And so this is very evocative of that for me. So I really like that. And as you can see, I'm almost starting to get some perspective on autumn. I'm getting a sense of what this perspective is on autumn. Overall, there feels like there is a positive perspective on autumn. Okay, so we might be able to kind of come in here and say what we like, what we don't like. Let's see if I can come up with a don't like. I mean, as we get down here, there is a little bit of sadness. There is wailful. Okay. There is kind of a wistfulness or a sadness that comes through, I think, in this, which is a little bit sadder and maybe a little bit less that I don't like quite as much. Okay, so that is likes and dislikes, just getting a kind of a general feel of where we are with regard to this poem. I'm not sure if have any of you thought about that, or do you have any opinions to convey? If not, I'll just move on. Let's talk about some of, first of all, meaning related things. And I'm sorry, this is kind of loading a little bit here. Any questions that you have about the meaning? Winnowing, I guess we could look that up, and I'm going to just do this like so. I'm going to just do a little comments off to the side if that works. Winnowing is a process. So this is a meaning related thing. This would be an asterisk. It is and you would actually use a winnowing fan of separating the the grain from the chaff. This is the chaff is much lighter. Fan, the chaff gets blown away and the grain is left behind. This is very common harvesting imagery. Okay, melancholy, reference to looming death. Absolutely. So there is some melancholy here in terms of, maybe positive, maybe negative, depending on how much, your own kind of opinion on that. We might even bring in this poppies. Poppies is kind of an interesting choice here. This is the flower that heroin and opium is made out of. So this is a flower from which heroin in our day and age and opium in Keats's day and age were derived. So there is kind of, like maybe even some ideas there about death, about sleep, that all this kind of nature and Keats as well are going to be going to sleep. There is this kind of overall symbolism of autumn that I think is significant here. I do want to get into one other thing before we get into the imagery. Did anyone notice, and I'm gonna pause for like about 10 or 15 seconds. Did anyone notice the big example of figurative language that is present? This is another meaning related thing. Huge example of figurative language here. Anyone notice it? Okay. It is in the second stanza, personification. Thank you. Yep. We have a personified autumn. Who hath not seen thee, you, often amid your store? Sometimes whoever seeks abroad may see you sitting careless on a granary floor. By the way, this is maybe a good technique, is to switch out your these and thys with you and your. Thy hair soft lifted by the winnowing wind. So this autumn has hair, and sound asleep, drowsed with the fume of poppies, while thy hook, and a hook is like a scythe, if you know that kind of another harvesting tool. You see death with it sometimes, spares the next swath, so it's not going to cut it down yet with all its twined flowers. And sometimes like a gleaner. Okay, a gleaner is one who kind of goes in after a crop has been reaped and waits for that moment and actually takes whatever's left over. Gleaner, thou dost keep steady thy leaden head across a brook. You can almost see him kind of falling asleep a little bit. Or by a cider press with patient look, you watch the last oozings hours by hours. Now, pretty important here, we notice personification. Okay, so that's great. Noticing personification is a meaning-related thing. So let's go ahead and say that this is a meaning thing, personification. And but let's think about that. Is this a positive personifying of autumn, or is this a scary or negative personifying of autumn? Because we could definitely go that route. I mean, autumn is depicted in a somewhat harrowing or scary kind of demeanor at some points. I really think that this is a positive, kind of approachable person that is being described. I might even go as far as to say kind of cute, you know, hair soft lifted by the wind. He's like kind of falling asleep. Not terrifying for sure. So we'll talk more about figurative language in the future. I do want to talk about some of the imagery now, because I think this is a meaning related thing that we can look at for sure. When you look at some of the imagery, autumn can have a lot of negative imagery associated with it. You don't have to look far to find a poem about autumn that is kind of harsh, you know, kind of describing, you know, bare branches and that sort of thing. None of that here. This is a very warm, abundant kind of vision of autumn. We have, you know, some visual imagery right here. Vines, fruit that round the thatch eaves run. We see cottage trees bending with apples. And so this is, I call this another meaning related thing. This is visual imagery. And again, I want to say, is this kind of conveying anything? I really think, again, this is abundant, positive, welcoming. I mean, this is a scene that I really find appealing. So that's visual imagery. Now let's look a little bit further down. We have some things that are actually probably calling to mind some taste as well. Actually, really the fruit, the apples to a certain extent, but we have a mention of a sweet kernel. So hazel shell has a sweet kernel. In some ways, we can go all the way down to these bees, you know, with their clammy cells. That is probably honey. And so in some way, I'm going to actually call this meaning as well. And I think this is gustatory. There is some gustatory imagery that is going on here. And again, I think it's positive. There is sweetness. And you know, really conjuring some positive gustatory imagery here. Again, is this giving us a sense of what the speaker's perspective on autumn is? I'm going to go down a little bit further, and I see down here, where are the songs spring? Where are they? Think not of them, thy hast thy music too. And actually, we do have some visual imagery here. Borrowed clouds bloom, the soft dying day, rosy hue. Lots of beautiful visual imagery there. But I'm actually going to focus on all this wonderful imagery down here, which is the music of autumn. So this is another meaning-related thing, and this is auditory imagery. And once again, I mean, this is beautiful. I'm going to go ahead and say maybe a little bit wistful. As Denise said, maybe a little bit melancholy. Okay, it's kind of getting lost there, but spelled it wrong. Yeah, I think that I do need to mention that they say a wailful choir. So, I mean, there is a little bit of wistfulness or melancholy there. But I think more than anything, that is just because autumn is going to be leaving soon. Full-grown lambs, loud bleat from hilly born. They may be, being slaughtered soon. Hedge crickets sing. That's not going to be happening soon. Redbreast is probably going to be traveling somewhere else. Same with the swallows are going to be flying south. And so there is a little bit of wistfulness here, but still beautiful. Okay. We don't need the songs of spring. There is this beautiful music of autumn. Now, I could go on to a bunch of things, structural, language. There are definitely some really cool things to notice about this poem, but that's not our focus this week. Our focus is imagery. What I'm going to do as we get to the end here is I'm going to give you a paragraph that I kind of put together, and I'm just going to copy and paste this into the bottom of our document here with Keats. Let me just read this to you right here while we're at it. This is what a body paragraph should look like, where you're talking about how does the poet use a certain poetic technique to convey meaning. And in this case, we want to get their perspective on autumn. So we want, in our body paragraphs, our topic sentences should really imitate the wording of that. Okay, so I say Keats uses an abundance of pleasant imagery to emphasize the speaker's, see ya, Gavin, speaker's welcoming, if wistful attitude toward autumn. So I want to try to get that in a nutshell best I can. Firstly, Keats uses visual imagery to depict a welcoming scene by depicting vines, line 4, and moss cottage trees, 5, as heavy with fruit. Keats associates autumn with richness and abundance, revealing a strongly positive perspective on the part of the speaker. Keats also employs gustatory imagery to lend a sweetness to the speaker's observations on autumns, mentioning the sweet kernel of hazel shells, and that's line 7 to 8, and clammy cells of bees, or brimmed with honey. That's line 11. Okay, so gustatory imagery. Finally, Keats conjures auditory imagery, describing the beautiful, if somewhat sad, music of autumn. And I just took kind of a larger passage, so I'm going to use this as a offset quote. Full-grown lambs, loud bleat from hilly born, hedge crickets sing, and now with treble soft, the redbreast whistles from a garden croft, and gathering swallows twitter in the sky. There's my 3 examples. I gave 3 examples of imagery, different types of imagery, all showing that very positive perspective. I'm going to wrap it up with a wrap sentence. These pleasant images convey the speaker's affectionate attitude toward the autumn scene he witnesses. These images also reveal a somewhat mournful tone as well, but only in as much as the speaker seems to anticipate autumn's imminent departure. Okay, so this is what I would consider to be a model paragraph, talking about imagery. As they mentioned in the prompt, maybe we could go on to talk about structure. And then I think it would make a lot of sense to go on and talk about figurative language, and in particular, talk about the personification. Each of those things, we need to show how it's showing this sort of welcoming or positive attitude toward autumn. We want to stay on message with that. Okay, so I'm going to copy this into the bottom of to Keats or to autumn, and you guys can have that for your use, and just kind of noticing the way that a body paragraph within the poetry prompt is set up. Why don't you give me any questions that you have? We're pretty much at the end here. If you want to go ahead and give me any questions that you have about this or about anything else, or any suggestions that you would have for future sessions, go ahead and sound off in the comments while I'm getting this in here. Okay. All right. Let me switch over to this, and I just want to remind you what's happening next. Yeah, not this. Fall deal. The fall deal ends tonight at midnight. And what is the fall deal? $15 for one subject and $30 for all of them. Pretty good deal. And the price is going to increase by $5 per month. So if you, can't do the math, but if you freak out in April, it's going to be quite a bit more expensive than it is now. And the funny thing is that you will have gotten a lot more value out of this than if you waited until that last minute. Love to have you guys along for the ride. Moving forward, you have, and this is bad, you can't really see it as well as you can, but down in the middle of our crowdcast, you see replays in future live sessions. That is what you need to click on in order to be able to access this beyond tonight. Okay, so if you have any questions about that as well, if you don't see that button, let me know. That's where you go. Follow us on YouTube, follow us on Facebook so that you can, at any point join up. But from here on out, replays, future live sessions, you do need to sign up, and this is the best time to sign up. Okay. Any questions? Denise, I'm just going to answer your question is because of time restraints, what is the length expectation of the essay? We'll talk about, I did kind of talk about that a couple weeks ago. I recommend just doing a really short introductory paragraph. Ideally, you can do 3 body paragraphs like the one I shared, each of which that deals with a poetic technique. So, imagery, structure, and figurative language would be great. I think it's better to do 2 really strong body paragraphs than it is to do 3 weaker kind of body paragraphs. So I tell my own students that, if you have 10 minutes, go on to that 3rd body paragraph. If you have 5 minutes, maybe just beef up those 2 that you have right now and just get those so that those are solidly answering the question. The conclusion, I barely write anything. I restate the thesis, and I think they understand that because of time constraints, I can't put, a neat little bow on the end of this. So that's kind of my strategy. We'll talk a little bit about the time constraints and the strategy there, but that's kind of in a nutshell what I think. Does that answer your question, Denise? I don't know if you're still there. Okay. I guess that's it. If you guys want to stick around and ask any further questions, I'll stick around for maybe about 3 to 5 minutes here if you want. Again, go to the replays, future live sessions to sign up, and we'll try to get you a 5 on the AP exam. Okay. Thanks, Denise. Are you going to Stratford at all yourself this season? Don't know if you're gone, but anyways, love going to Stratford. You are going. What are you seeing? Thanks, Selena. Glad it helped. Shakespeare? Cool. What one? Do you know? I hear Coriolanus is the show of the decade. Hearing a lot of really good things about that, and unfortunately, it's looking like I'm going to miss that. And The Tempest looks pretty interesting too, with the female Prospero. That should be interesting, seeing that with. Okay, so you're seeing Coriolanus. Yeah, I've heard it's just amazing. People are saying great things. Of course, most everything is pretty darn good. Well, we're going to be down there October 12th, so I don't know. That's Friday, Friday after next, so I'm pretty excited about that. And hopefully if I can get a chaperone to take all my students back, I'm going to stick around for Saturday. So enjoy, and hopefully we'll see you guys back next week. Thank you very much.